real significance of this first summit is that it is happening
It's
at
also
all.
the kind of music that's all over the internet in MP3
There are also
format.
healthcare workers and civil servants here angry about budget cuts and worried about their
Organizers
jobs.
of today's protests say it's obvious Harris hasn't gotten the
Same
message.
chill freezing genetically modified foods out of Europe could be
The
setting
land
in
giveaway
here.
grows. It's become an issue raised at international summits.
Hello, I'm Knowlton Nash. 3 elections and their dramatic aftermath dominate this special edition of News and Review. In Canada, Prime Minister Jean Chretien wins a resounding 3rd straight majority with more seats than ever before. In the United States, 4 weeks after the vote in November, people still didn't know who the new president was going to be. In Yugoslavia, the refusal by President Slobodan Milosevic to accept his defeat in parliamentary elections brings on a revolution and a new government. Back in Canada, municipal officials are grappling with a problem of another sort: garbage and what to do with it. Should it be recycled or shipped to landfill sites? And we have the story of a group of high school students who waged a fierce battle to try to keep commercials out of their school. In late November of 2000, Canadians went to the polls to elect a federal government. They were being offered a choice between 5 major parties and several lesser-known ones. From the beginning, though, the contest was portrayed as a race between 2 main rivals with different visions and different values: the ruling Liberals and the upstart Canadian Alliance. Which one would get the chance to lead Canada into the next century? But as they cast their ballots after a 5-week campaign, were still grumbling about why there was an election in the first place. It had been less than 3.5 years since the last one, and usually it's more like 4 or 5 years. It seemed the only person who really wanted the vote was the man who called it, Jean Chretien.
1, 2, 3, go.
That's why many analysts described his strategy as a gamble. But when the votes were counted that night, it was clear Chretien's gamble had paid off. He led his Liberal Party to its 3rd straight majority government, making him the first Prime Minister in 55 years to accomplish that.
Tonight, the people of Canada are renewed their confidence in our program, in our team, and in my leadership. It
was a convincing victory for Chretien and a crushing loss for his opponents. The Liberals ended up with 172 seats, 11 more than they had when the campaign began. They won 100 of them in the key battleground of Ontario. The Canadian Alliance took 66 seats, 8 more than they had, but far fewer than they'd hoped for. Everyone else slipped, the Bloc Québécois to 38 seats, the NDP to 13, and the Conservatives to 12. The final results made Chretien's decision to call an early election seem like a stroke of genius, and yet many Liberals did not think it was a very good idea at the time. So why did he call it when he did? And why was it so easy for him to win so big? It was a beautiful fall day in late October when Jean Chretien announced the vote, and the first question reporters asked him was, why now?
We are in a very unusual situation. The opposition parties are already campaigning. They have asked for election. Mr. Day dare me to call an election.
That dare Chretien talked about came the month before in the House of Commons.
Will he do one of 2 things, either resign because he has no support over there, or call an election based on his record of being the highest taxing leader in the G7 countries?
But talk of a fall election had been in the air long before Canadian Alliance leader Stockwell Day made that comment. There were likely several reasons why Chretien called an early election. The economy was booming, unemployment was way down, and the government had a surplus of funds. Chretien wanted to silence critics, including many in the Liberal Party, who said it was time for him to resign and allow someone like Finance Minister Paul Martin to take over. At the same time, the public opinion polls gave the Liberals a huge lead, and Chretien wanted the vote before the Alliance and its new leader had a chance to prepare. Chretien himself also talked about needing a new mandate to deal with the huge surplus of money the government had. Whatever the reason, the race was underway. The campaign was pitting the Liberals against 3 old rivals: the Progressive Conservative Party under Joe Clark, a former Prime Minister who was back to lead his Tories out of the political wilderness.
Hi, Kimberly. Pleased to see you.
the NDP and leader Alexa McDonough, a party whose very survival seemed to be at stake. And the Bloc Québécois with Gilles Duceppe was fighting its third election as the separatist voice in Parliament. But the Liberals' main opponent was an old rival with a new makeover. Half a year before the election, the Reform Party was scrapped, and so was its leader, Preston Manning. In its place, the Canadian Alliance was created and Stockwell Day was picked to head the party. The idea was to unite Conservative candidates and voters under one party label, especially in seat-rich Ontario, to win more seats. And so it began. As Jean Chretien's buses rolled down the campaign trail, his opponents took aim, labeling Chretien arrogant and out of touch, and saying the only reason he called the early vote was personal ambition.
Many of you are familiar with Madonna's Blonde Ambition Tour. Well, yesterday, the Prime Minister launched his own version, the Blind Ambition Tour. And it's Canadians who are footing the bill.
Jerking around the public like we're yo-yos on the end of a string. That's what the Prime Minister has been doing.
They're not acting for the population. I think that there's a lot of content, arrogance, cynicism with this government.
What's wrong with the Parliament of Canada today, particularly what's wrong with federal Liberals, is that they're so arrogant that they don't understand that you have to re-earn the people's trust every single day that you have the privilege of representing them. That's what New Democrats are going to do, and that's why I'm optimistic about this election and its outcome.
And for days after, that's how it continued. The main issue was shaping up to be Chretien himself, not health care or taxes or any of the other things a voter might expect. The campaign, though, didn't really kick into high gear until a couple of weeks later, on the night of the second leaders' debate. It was a raucous encounter, one in which issues were still being overshadowed by insults. Tom Kennedy has that story.
This may be the most nerve-wracking moment for campaigning political leaders, those last few minutes before a live televised debate, each knowing that a good performance could pay big dividends and a blunder could be disastrous. And just like in last night's French debate, the big target, Jean Chretien, the man whose party leads in the polls. The challenge of the other leaders to provoke a mistake. Chretien's challenge to avoid one. Example, law and order.
I'm being very clear about we want to have a very good control of guns in Canada. It's extremely important. It's working. It will be in
Mr. Chretien, you talk about security, sir, but every time we bring an issue forward which would truly bring security to our streets and our homes of this country, you do not want to support it.
Your only remedy to any problem is to put aside the Charter of Rights.
Why we don't seize the opportunity we have with this surplus to invest in the things that we know will prevent crime.
Where are you for children? Don't talk about tax credits when your own MPs have pleaded with you, sir, to say bring in something to protect children from child pornography. You didn't do it, sir.
And one more target, the party in second place in the polls. If the Conservatives have any chance of a comeback, they must eat into support for the alliance. Joe Clark, accusing Stockwell Day of hiding a right-wing agenda from the Canadian people.
Why don't you have the courage?
Not the policy.
What is the policy? What is the policy then?
Joe, you asked me a question,
Why is it in your document?
Joe, you asked me a question, Joe. You asked me a question. Now I'm going to answer it.
All right. For people in
thank you,
this
Alexa. And thank you, Joe. You've had 30 years to make your point. I'll take 30 seconds to make mine.
And then public financing, an opening for the opposition leaders to hammer Chretien once again on the Jobs Fund controversy and the police investigations that are still continuing.
You agree, she agrees, he does not agree.
I don't, Mr. Chretien, and I thank you for bringing this up.
Excuse me, poverty is growing, 1.3 million children living in poverty, where the healthcare system is coming apart. What kind of a notion of deficit is it?
When we started, we had $42 billion deficit. Oh, no, but it is the reality. Because of good administration, after at the end of the second term, now we're debating
because of the free trade agreement, because of the American economy.
I know that your favorite song is "Don't Worry, Be Happy." I'm telling you, the next one will be worried as an acquiry.
Let the police do his work. That we're balancing.
As the debate went on, Chretien continued trying to dodge the attacks. But then, healthcare and a moment's relief, as Alliance found itself faced with the accusation It supports a two-tier healthcare system.
No two-tier healthcare. Now, I've said that very clearly. And would you do one of two things? Either right now, sir, would you call me a liar, please, or would you pull those ads that are wrong?
And the people of Canada, they don't want to have a two-tier system, one for the rich and one for the rest of us.
Call me a liar or pull those U.S. negative-style ads. One of the two, which one will it be?
I will tell you, sir, that when you wrote to the premiers, you said don't sign an agreement.
No, I did not.
We will not enforce the conditions.
My question.
But inevitably, no matter what the topic, the focus kept shifting to Chretien and his government's record.
Not a penny for a national pharmacare program.
We have a plan.
You're right.
And the
no
plan,
cash,
madame,
no clothes. You don't put the cash in, you give it away in tax cuts.
You have to accept some responsibility for your own actions. You're the guy who gutted the Canadian health system.
I will not apologize because we have a surplus.
You'll never apologize. That's a problem with you.
I will not apologize because there is hope in this nation.
This probably will be the opposition leader's last chance to confront Chretien directly. Generally, leaders like to leave plenty of time after a debate to recover from any mistakes. This campaign has just passed its halfway point.
The tone of that debate continued for the rest of the campaign, a race that many called the nastiest in memory, where policy issues often took a back seat to personal attacks. As much as Canadians may not have approved of the campaign, there was one aspect of Stockwell Day's personal beliefs that many found surprising. Some say it cost him a lot of credibility and his party many votes. The damage was contained in a CBC documentary by Paul Hunter on Day's concerns and his beliefs. Here's part of what it said.
Of all the views expressed by Day over the years, there is one from which literally everything else flows, his belief on how it all began. It came out during a speech he gave in 1997 at Red Deer College during Christian Awareness Week. It was billed as a talk about evolution. Professor Pliny Hayes took his class in for a listen, and to this day, he and some of his students can hardly believe what they heard.
And he prefaced his comments with a smile and a question, are any of my friends from the press present? And when no one responded, he then went on to say a number of things. One, that the Earth is 6,000 years old, that Adam and Eve were real people, that humans coexisted with dinosaurs, that there's as much evidence for evolution, or for creationism rather, as there is for evolution, and that he's upset that creationism can't be taught in public schools.
He said those words?
He said those words, yeah. There are a number of social issues, controversial social issues, abortion, death penalty, about which honest, well-meaning people will have different opinions, and their opinions are often informed by their religious beliefs, and I think that's absolutely appropriate. But here we're not talking about things that are a matter of personal opinion. The age of the Earth is a subject of scientific inquiry. There's a massive scientific data on the age of the Earth, and it all says that the Earth is between 4.5 and 5 billion years old, and that it is not, that it could not be 6,000 years old. It is absolutely clear that humans did not coexist with dinosaurs. And as for creationism and evolution, there is a mountain of evidence which says that evolution happened. There is simply no discussion of that in biology.
Just how much that documentary hurt Stockwell Day is up for debate, but it was one of many factors Canadians were considering as they prepared to head to the polls. A couple of other themes emerged in the final week of the campaign. Both Day and Joe Clark suggested Jean Chretien may have broken the law by helping a friend get a federal loan. This hotel in Chretien's writing was at the center of the accusations against him. The owner of the hotel was denied a loan from the Business Development Bank, a federal Crown corporation. Chretien called the bank's president to ask him to reconsider. The opposition parties called it abusing his influence, but federal ethics counselor Howard Wilson did not agree. In a letter, Wilson wrote, "There is no rule preventing a minister, including the Prime Minister, from having direct contact on behalf of a constituent with a Crown corporation."
Both Mr. Day and Mr. Clark have overstepped the accepted bounds of fairness and decency, which have been our tradition in Canadian elections.
But Chretien's opponents refused to back down or apologize.
The question had been, what are the rules regarding an intervention by the Prime Minister in the activities of a Crown corporation? The answer is there are no rules. So Mr. Chretien gets off on a technicality.
Jean Chretien said it was his job to intervene and to get this mortgage application going. Well, it's my job to ask questions about it.
One other issue that arose in the final days of the campaign was the prospect of a minority government, one in which the Liberals would win the most seats, but not a majority where it could rule on its own. It was a scenario that seemed pleasing to Chretien's critics and opponents, a way of breaking the Liberals' 7-year stranglehold on Parliament, and they urged voters to keep it in mind as they cast their ballots. On election eve, reporters covering the campaign had a look back at the race with an eye to what might lie ahead. Sasha Petrusik begins our roundup.
Jean Chretien spent the day back in his home riding. Throughout this campaign, Chretien has been under attack for favoring his hometown friends. Here, he brags about it, saying that bringing his riding federal money and jobs is his first priority. Never mind that the company right across the street is one of several under RCMP investigation for misspent grants. Chretien says he's confident of a majority government tomorrow, sure that Canadians wouldn't risk a minority.
They don't want to have a minority government where the Bloc Québécois might have, or most probably will have, the balance of power.
Stockwell Day campaigned on the final Sunday by video cassette, buying airtime on TV stations in Ontario only to tell voters it's time for a change.
Do you trust the Jean Chretien Liberals to do the right thing?
The address capped off a campaign that found the Alliance message obscured time and again, like the photo op at Niagara Falls. Day tried to illustrate the north to south brain drain, then found out the Niagara River flows south to north.
If somebody has wrongly informed me about the flow of this particular water, then I'll be having a pretty interesting discussion.
A rookie mistake, but because Canadians didn't really know Day, the Liberals seized on every gaffe and began sowing doubts about much bigger issues like Medicare.
Never, never, never.
Never, 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 never. I hear that a lot, and I'll say it again, and the whole
Day fought back, but seemed constantly on the defensive over the party's policies on health care, on referendums for things like abortion and capital punishment. Even his own beliefs in creationism were scrutinized.
I don't think the particular beliefs of an individual in public policy any more than asking a Roman Catholic what their belief is.
Chuck Strahl, who was the party's House leader, says the Liberals succeeded in putting doubts in the minds of Canadians about Stockwell Day.
And it was done day after day to the point where people said, I don't know what to believe. And because they don't know what to believe, they have some doubt.
The leader from the past, trying to build his diminished party for the future. The politician staking it all on his own bid for a seat in the middle of Alliance territory. The Conservative campaign has been all about selling Joe Clark.
People judge parties by their leaders, and I think that the approval of me personally has undoubtedly helped a lot of our candidates.
He wasn't so upbeat weeks ago. His campaign was dubbed Joe's Lonely Tour, talking policy to sparse crowds with little media attention.
Honor your commitment.
But the Conservatives counted on Clark to turn things around, to perform strongly during the leaders' debates. He delivered.
You're always fighting with Ralph Klein, with Mike Harris. You fight with premiers all the time.
This followed
Jean Chretien's greatest lies.
An obnoxious attack ad. It seemed at odds with Clark's careful campaign. But it was designed to go after disenchanted Liberals, says the party's campaign manager, while keeping Clark's hands clean.
When you're doing a negative ad, you don't put your leader's voice on it or his face.
They say it paid off. Their standing in the polls grew, so did the crowds. Clark sharpened his attacks on the Liberals and Alliance. Now, on this day, when the sport of politics took a back seat to the Grey Cup, Joe Clark could only hope this, that when voters turn their attention from football to the federal election, they will respond to his call for a minority government with a key role for him in opposition.
McDonough started her campaign on Bay Street, where she criticized the Liberals for wanting to use the surplus to cut taxes instead of investing in social programs.
Broken promises on child care, broken promises on home care.
But other than the media, she had trouble getting anyone's attention.
Good morning, how are you?
A problem that dogged her for most of the campaign. She usually attracted only small crowds and was often preaching to the converted.
We can't inflict on Canadians another arrogant Liberal majority government.
Despite the reaction, she stayed on course, always sticking to her message of fewer tax cuts and more funding to social programs, particularly health care. And the NDP made another strategic decision, to focus its campaign in ridings where it already held a seat or in areas where the party appeared to have a chance.
A final tour today of the Bloc headquarters. Gilles Duceppe tells party workers the payoff is coming.
That's exactly what will happen tomorrow. I think we'll have more members than we have today.
In the last federal election, it was generally conceded Duceppe ran an inept campaign. He often says he learned a lesson. The day before this election call, the Bloc held a meeting. It laid out its strategy to defeat what it said was its only serious adversary. The Liberals, it said, are too soft on organized crime, particularly the warring biker gangs. They're too hard on the poor, cutting transfers to the provinces for social services. And in Jean Chretien's hometown, the Bloc said the Liberal leader is corrupt, doling out public money to his friends. But we, the Bloc kept saying, are the only party which exists solely to protect Quebec's interests. The final days, a 36-hour non-stop blitz of Quebec. Duceppe pushed the sovereignty issue to motivate volunteers, and he told them, keep working till the last minute.
After a grueling 35-day campaign, it finally came down to what the voters wanted. And that takes us back to where we began. John Chretien has always prided himself as a guy who is underestimated, but also a guy who can turn around and fool people. And on election night, he did it like never before. When the votes were tallied, he and his party had a bigger majority than they did going in. They managed to win seats in every region of the country. And in Chretien's home province of Quebec, it was the Liberals' best showing in 20 years. The results seemed to say Canadians were enjoying an economic boom and looking forward to the Liberals' promise of huge tax cuts. They also apparently had forgiven Chretien for calling an early election. Still, millions of Canadians, about 1 in 3 registered voters, never even bothered to vote. It was the lowest turnout this country has seen in 75 years. As for Alexa McDonough and her New Democrats, it was a disappointing night. The 13 seats they ended up with were 6 less than what they started with, barely hanging on to their official party status. For Joe Clark, his Conservative Party also finished with fewer seats, but with official party status, which many observers thought it wouldn't get, and more than 12% of the popular vote. And it was at least a personal victory for a man so many had written off. As for Gilles Duceppe, he put a brave face on what was also a disheartening finish. His Bloc Québécois lost 6 seats, though his critics gave him credit for a strong campaign. Duceppe vowed to continue the fight for Quebec's sovereignty. And finally, the Canadian Alliance. For a new party with a new leader, it ended up with an old problem. Eric Sorensen filed this report the day after a disappointing night.
They gained more seats and more votes, even in Ontario, enough for Stockwell Day to feel encouraged.
This is day 1 of the next federal election campaign.
We're leading in some seats in Ontario right now. All right!
But the excitement in the Day camp faded quickly last night when it became clear the opposition was going to finish more than 100 seats behind the Liberals.
The message to us is not yet, not this time.
In spite of the improvements, the outcome was a big disappointment. The purpose of creating the alliance was to unite right-wing voters, to challenge the Liberal majority and end the Liberal stranglehold in Ontario. The alliance and its new leader accomplished neither. And things went from bad to worse right in the middle of Day's speech last night. It was easy to miss. See the numbers on the left? At the bottom, the Tories sit at 11 seats, and then 12. Quietly, official party status for Joe Clark's Conservatives. And after 2 years, the Unite the Right movement, it seems, hadn't moved very far at all.
There's got to be a lot of rethinking at this point. This is a party that just about twisted itself into a pretzel to try and get into Ontario.
This political scientist says Day has big challenges ahead.
How does he get that trust? You know, how does he establish a comfort zone with Ontario voters and with women voters and with urban voters in a lot of places in Canada?
Canadians didn't get much chance to know Day before the election. He was defined as much by images and photo ops as by his party's policies. After being outmaneuvered by the Liberals in the campaign, the challenge for Day is to reassure his supporters he can do better given more time. During the campaign, the Alliance theme song belted out the lyrics, "I'm in a hurry to get things done." For a party in a hurry, the next election looks very far away. Eric Sorensen, CBC News, Penticton, British Columbia.
Americans like to hold up their political system as simply the best there is. But in some ways, the presidential election in the year 2000 showed that system at its worst and its most confusing. The vote was described as a fiasco, a debacle, a farce. Pick your word. It was a confusing muddle no American had expected, but one that emerged clearly on election night as the major networks covered the results.
It was the night the media got it wrong. Headlines across the country preserving the blunder in bold type forever. Journalists getting ahead of the story and getting caught, live, on air, in front of the entire country. Not just once, but twice.
Earlier, we don't just have egg in our face, we've got omelet all over our suits.
It started early when the networks gave Florida to Al Gore and then took it back. Hours later, the anchors gave Florida to George Bush.
ABC News is now going to project that Florida goes to Mr. Bush.
George Bush, governor of Texas, will become the 43rd president of the United States.
Then they were forced to take it all back.
What the networks give us, the networks take it away.
We simply don't know who has won this race.
And folks, in the year 2004, please, could you make up your minds a little more conclusively?
Well, as you can see, it was not conclusive at all, especially not after a wild night of tallying up the results. To understand the full extent of this political mess, you have to understand the nature of the U.S. political system itself. The Democratic Party's candidate, Vice President Al Gore, won more votes across the United States than the Republican, Texas Governor George W. Bush. But you don't actually become president by winning the most votes. You win through a unique institution called the Electoral College. U.S. voters don't actually vote directly for the president. They vote for members of the Electoral College, who in turn choose the president. Each state gets a certain number of votes in the Electoral College, depending on its population. Whoever wins 270 or more votes wins the White House. But on that night in November in the year 2000, neither candidate hit that mark, and neither could without winning one state, the state of Florida. As you saw earlier, the race in Florida was extremely close between Democrat Al Gore and Republican George W. Bush. So close that while people's heads were still buzzing from the confusion of election night, they had to start recounting Florida's votes all over again the next day.
George Bush.
Election supervisors were quickly back at work today to start the vote recount, triggered automatically in Florida when the vote difference is less than half of 1%. Florida Governor Jeb Bush, the Republican candidate's brother, said to avoid a conflict of interest, he wouldn't be involved in the recount process.
This is hugely important business. And, you know, what's at stake is the next leader of the free world. And I think that everybody ought to allow this process to work.
But Democrats alleged there were voting irregularities and complained that because of a confusing ballot card in Palm Beach, Gore supporters there may have ended up voting for a fringe candidate.
It was very confusing. I had to did mine over. I had to ask for another card to do it over because I made a mistake.
In Austin, George W. Bush emerged with his vice presidential nominee Dick Cheney, confident his narrow lead will hold.
This morning brings news from Florida that the final vote count there shows that Secretary Cheney and I have carried the state of Florida. And if that result is confirmed in an automatic recount, as we expect it to be, that we have won the election.
And that's the way it looked shortly after 2 a.m. Eastern this morning when U.S. network anchors called the presidential race. Outside the state capitol here, the Bush victory celebration began. But the cheers quickly turned into an anxious silence when it was announced that Vice President Al Gore wasn't conceding the election after all.
It's frustrating. We thought we had a victory.
And now?
And now we're not sure.
It's kind of like Texas weather. If you don't like it, just wait 15 minutes, it'll change.
Newspapers across the country were caught off guard. After this jubilant headline, the Austin newspaper had to stop the presses and rerun them to recognize a new reality. This afternoon, workers were dismantling the stage where Bush had hoped to deliver his victory speech. History was indeed on hold.
The day after, the election night that never really ended. The crowd's gone without their party, without any sign of the man this was all for. Al Gore finally emerged this afternoon, betraying little of the tension he must be feeling.
We now need to resolve this election in a way that is fair, forthright, and fully consistent with our Constitution and our laws.
This, he said, is an extraordinary moment for American democracy. One President Bill Clinton said is the ultimate proof every vote counts.
The American people have now spoken, but it's going to take a little while to determine exactly what they said.
This great drama took its real turn in the middle of the night. With news of a Bush win, the crowd heard that Gore had called his opponent to concede. Emotionally drained, they waited for the speech they didn't want to hear. As Al Gore's motorcade made its slow, miserable way through Nashville, news filtered to the Gore camp that the Florida results were tight enough for a recount. Just meters from the stage, Al Gore and his team stopped to call George W. Bush to take back the concession. Here's the conversation as relayed by aides from both camps. Bush, let me make sure I understand. You're calling back to retract that concession? Gore, you don't have to get snippy about this. If, in fact, I lose Florida, I will immediately concede. Bush, do what you have to do. Within minutes, Gore's campaign manager talked to the crowd.
Until the recount is concluded and the results in Florida become official, our campaign continues.
While votes were counted in Florida, lost opportunities were mourned in Tennessee. This is Al Gore's home state. He couldn't carry it. Couldn't even carry supporters.
Well, I'd rather have Al Gore in there than Bush.
So why didn't you vote?
Well, just ain't never voted. I don't want to do no jury duty, that's why.
My wife voted, she voted for him, but I didn't vote.
Votes lost, votes never cast, in a race where every ballot counts.
That man who didn't vote wasn't alone. Just over 50% of eligible voters across the country actually cast ballots. Voter turnout in the United States is traditionally low, the lowest in the Western world. But this was even lower than usual. Many say that was a reflection of the campaign, a campaign where no dominant issue emerged, and where the U.S. public didn't seem to get very excited about either candidate, with voters wondering whether either man was really up to the job.
There really should be some candidates that we can say he's the best man. And instead, we wind up voting for whoever is the least worst.
George Bush is dumb, and Al Gore is, he comes across as very stiff and uptight.
I think our country is dying for leadership.
And you're not getting it with Bush and Gore?
No, not at all.
During the campaign, both men did things that raised serious questions about their leadership abilities. For Al Gore, the troubles were known as the fib factor, a habit of stretching the truth about his achievements.
I got some of the details wrong last week in some of the examples that I used, Jim, and I'm sorry about that.
For George W. Bush, there were doubts about whether he was smart enough for the job, doubts raised by a series of blunders. Then there was this ad.
He's pushing a big government plan that lets Washington bureaucrats interfere with what your doctors prescribe. The Gore prescription plan, bureaucrats decide.
You may have missed it, but freeze the frame and the word rats appears unmistakably on the screen. Some say it was a clear effort to get out a nasty subliminal message about Gore.
And I didn't see rats when I saw it, no.
But when Bush accused the Democrats of smelling rats that weren't there, he fumbled his words.
You know, the idea of putting subliminal messages into ads it's ridiculous. We need to be debating the issues.
However, the issues, things like the rising price of prescription drugs or protecting the environment, never really caught on. And so the election ended up in a tangled, ambiguous mess. Al Gore won the most votes overall, But George W. Bush had won Florida by the narrowest of margins, enough, though, to give him the presidency through the Electoral College system. But as we said earlier, they had to recount Florida's votes, starting a battle in the courts and in the streets.
He's a wuss. You're a wuss, man.
Democracy, American style. Bush and Gore supporters fighting over the strangest election anyone can remember.
Yeah, I'm an asshole because I stand up for my vote.
It's all come down to the story of the Sunshine State. A race so tight here, every single ballot is being counted again.
We will all remember these times as some of the most critical and defining moments in our nation's history.
The woman with the numbers everyone wants to hear. Only her news is, wait some more, until the recounts are certified and the absentee ballots are in. That could be at least November 17th.
Technicalities should not determine the presidency of the United States.
This is part of the new campaign in Florida. With stakes so high, the Bush and Gore camps have moved teams in to keep watch over the recount. The Gore people are thinking about taking this to the courts. Some Florida voters have already beaten them to it.
And these three individuals feel that they have not been able to exercise their votes properly.
These people agree they want more than a recount, though. They want the courts to give them another chance to vote. Residents of West Palm Beach who say they just got confused by the ballot ended up voting for reformer Pat Buchanan instead of Al Gore, thinking maybe, just maybe, that cost him the election. Here's what they say threw them off. On the left, Al Gore's name is the second from the top. But to pick him, voters needed to punch the third hole. That second hole went to reform candidate Pat Buchanan, and so did about 3,400 votes. Surprising to the voters, surprising even to him.
But it does seem to me that those are probably not my votes in those precincts in Palm Beach County.
The ballot in Palm Beach County that has been alleged to be confusing is a ballot that has been used before in Florida elections. It is a ballot that was approved by an elected Democratic official.
You might be wondering why they had problems with the ballots compared to other countries. In Canada, for example, the ballot is the same everywhere, and it's very simple. You make a mark beside the candidate's name. Well, in the United States, the ballots are different everywhere you go. As you saw, in some places, voters found the format confusing. In others, machines are used to punch the ballots. And in Florida, thousands of ballots were rejected because the machines used to count them couldn't read them. The Gore campaign wanted them recounted by hand, believing he would pick up extra votes and become the president. The Bush team wanted the hand recounts stopped, and they got some help from Florida's Secretary of State, Chretien Harris, who had the job of certifying the Florida results. She also happens to be a Republican who worked on the Bush campaign.
I hereby declare Governor George W. Bush the winner of Florida's 25 electoral votes for the President of the United States.
That's another curiosity and problem of the U.S. system. Elected officials with strong party ties are given responsibilities like deciding who won an election. Well, everyone knew Chretien Harris would not have the final say on who would be president. It went to the courts on many levels, an unprecedented legal quagmire that took the choice of president out of the hands of voters and put it in the hands of lawyers. In fact, for the first time ever, a presidential election went to the U.S. Supreme Court.
The U.S. Supreme Court, in this place of dignity and justice, mayhem. Separated by police and a deep political chasm.
They've counted 3 times. How many more times is Al Gore going to do this?
I feel as though this election has been stolen.
How so?
Okay, because the votes were there. They just weren't counted.
While some played to the cameras, others lined up for hours to catch a glimpse of history. The key legal question here, was the Florida Supreme Court really authorized to overrule the state legislature, order the manual recount? This is the first time the U.S. Supreme Court has ever intervened in a presidential election. The first time it's rushed out audio tapes of the proceedings. Here's Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
And I do not know of any case where we have impugned a state Supreme Court the way you are doing in this case.
Clearly uncharted legal territory. The best guess is there will not be a ruling from these justices until at least next week. But as eager as everyone is to hear what they have to say, a decision here will not be the end of it. Nearly 1 million ballots have been trucked to a Florida courtroom, awaiting a judge's decision on whether to recount them. That's critical to several of Gore's lawsuits. He must win them if he's to have any hope of being president. Winning at the U.S. Supreme Court would likely only boost public support.
I think that it was a very powerful interchange. I was pleased with it.
They were obviously interested in the question of why the Florida Supreme Court did what it did.
One more historic moment in a month of them. A month of protests, lawsuits, and still no president.
Winston Churchill once said that democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others. We sometimes take it for granted, not even bothering to vote. But in some parts of the world, it is a precious right, one that people are willing to fight and die for. That's what happened in Yugoslavia. In September 2000, the people voted for Vojislav Kostunica as their new president. But the man holding the job, Slobodan Milosevic, who had led the country to wars and near collapse in 13 years of power, refused to accept those results. Then the people of Yugoslavia took matters into their own hands and marched on the capital of Belgrade. The CBC's Don Murray reported from the front lines of history.
It was a huge crowd, a festive crowd. Facing them was a line of police. They too were relaxed. Some chatted with demonstrators and even shook hands. Then it began, with one young man and a flag. The police stopped him and wrestled him back. But the floodgates were open. The crowd poured through, hundreds of demonstrators. Up the main steps to the doors of the Parliament building. Among them were policemen, overwhelmed and outnumbered. At the top, they called on others to join them. It looked like victory, sudden and painless. It wasn't yet. From inside the building, police counterattacked with tear gas. The crowd retreated, but soon surged back. They attacked the wing of the Parliament. Demonstrators smashed windows and climbed inside. From one window, a young man waved a Yugoslav flag. Black smoke over the Parliament testified to the fires now burning inside.
What began as a peaceful demonstration has now become a pitched battle to take the symbol of this regime. Outside, you can see the crowds of people not only knocking at the doors but smashing in the windows. But inside, the police are still there. They have tear gas and undoubtedly other weapons.
"500 meters away, demonstrators were attacking the state television building. They set it alight. Crowds in the city watched the battle from their roofs. There was the sound of gunfire. Some police were fighting back. This man was hit. First aid workers said he'd been wounded with a 9mm bullet.
I said this man, Slobodan, animal, monstrum.
Then it was over. Just after 6 this evening, the police made their choice. In their jeeps, they drove away from the battle. In the streets, the crowds cheered and cried and shouted. After the Parliament and the state television, the third pillar of the Milosevic regime was now on their side. There had been major confrontations in the past. For 3 months in 1997, huge crowds had demonstrated against Milosevic, but his police had remained loyal, and he had remained in power. Tonight, the police abandoned him.
I think that this is a beautiful day for all the people of Serbia and all people all over the world. This is how democracy wins over autocracy.
As night fell, the presidential election winner, Vojislav Kostunica, addressed a rapturous crowd. He talked of liberated Serbia. Serbia is running a victory lap, he says, and along this lap, there is no room for Slobodan Milosevic. Soon after he spoke, the state news agency referred to him as the president of the country. The army let it be known it would not try to prop up Milosevic. At the end of this momentous day, there were still tens of thousands of people in the streets around the Parliament. They were celebrating an abrupt but heady liberation over a man who tonight remained silent and invisible, but whose iron grip on Yugoslavia had finally been broken.
The man so reviled on the streets of Belgrade came to power 13 years ago. Slobodan Milosevic was the communist leader of Serbia, who went on to control all of Yugoslavia. His regime was known for its brutal suppression of all opposition. He used the country's security service to kidnap and even kill his opponents. And he led his country into repeated wars and brought it to its knees economically. When he came to power in Serbia, it was part of a much bigger Yugoslavia. But it was a Yugoslavia teetering on the brink of disintegration. And Milosevic pushed it so much closer to the edge of the precipice. The CBC's Brian Stewart prepared this look at Yugoslavia in May of 1991.
Trouble here in southern Europe has always been dangerous. It's that old Balkan powder keg, where fierce nationalist rivalries helped spark the First World War. Following that war, the victorious powers hoped to finally pacify the area by artificially creating Yugoslavia, a new state encompassing more than a half-dozen small nationalities. From the rubble of two fallen empires, the Austro-Hungarian to the north, the Ottoman Empire to the south. From the beginning, it was a nation of extreme divisions between ethnic groups, religions, languages, economies, and ideologies. During the Second World War, one man, Joseph Broz, called Tito, almost single-handedly reshaped a new Yugoslavia. A communist, he led Yugoslavia's remarkable guerrilla war against German occupation. And in the elation following victory, he successfully defied centralized communist control by Stalin. By keeping Yugoslavia outside the Soviet bloc, Tito allowed better economic growth and gave Yugoslavia international standing. He also used an iron fist to keep ethnic groups in line, and in 1946 built a federal structure to prevent domination by any one of the 6 main nationalities. He set up 6 republics: Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Montenegro, Macedonia, and Serbia, all given equal say in Yugoslavia's affairs. To ease the country's key fear, domination by the Serbs, the largest ethnic group, he later sliced off 2 of Serbia's parts, setting up the autonomous provinces of Vojvodina and Kosovo. Many Serbs want Kosovo back, under their control. It's now a center of ethnic strife between Serbs and Albanians. And since Tito's death in 1980, much of his edifice has seemed ready to crumble. The weakening of Communist Party rule is coinciding with an explosion of nationalist sentiments in this country of 23 million people. Last year, 4 of the 6 republics ended communist rule in Yugoslavia's first ever multi-party elections. 2 of them, Slovenia and Croatia, now demand a loose federation, sovereignty association. They threaten to secede if blocked. But the reaction has been fierce from that key power bloc, Serbia, which has remained communist and which insists on keeping all of Yugoslavia a strong centralized state. The Serbian leader, Slobodan Milosevic, has warned Croatia, which contains many Serbs, that a breakaway will not be tolerated. And Serbs within Croatia stand with the government. The army, dominated by Serb officers, has been poised to enter Croatia, a move many fear could spark a civil war, given Yugoslavia's climate of widespread unrest, where armed militias and street demonstrations are now part of the political landscape, making the nation appear once again a powder keg.
And that powder keg blew up with ferocious violence. Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, and Macedonia all declared their independence, but it was not a friendly parting. The birth of Croatia and Bosnia-Herzegovina was especially bloody. Serbs living there wanted the regions to become a part of a greater Serbia. Milosevic armed and supported them. There were allegations that the Serbs were committing atrocities, and there was evidence of mass killings. Serb shelling reduced much of the Bosnian capital of Sarajevo to rubble, and civilians were often the targets. International pressure built on the Serbs to end the fighting. Much of the world imposed sanctions on Serbia. NATO threatened to bomb Serb positions, and when that didn't work, it did send in its warplanes. Finally, in 1995, the parties negotiated a peace deal in Dayton, Ohio. Slobodan Milosevic was now cast in the role of a statesman and peacemaker on the world stage. The international community rewarded him by lifting some of the sanctions it had imposed on his country. Those sanctions had crippled the Serbian economy since 1991. But there was another crisis simmering. It was in the province of Kosovo. Milosevic had abolished the province's autonomy in 1989, and Serbs took control of the province from the ethnic Albanians who had been running it. The Albanian Kosovars started demanding full independence. By 1998, some of them took up arms and fighting broke out. Milosevic turned to terror campaigns and repression to stop the demand for independence. The West and Russia put pressure on the Serbs and ethnic Albanians to end the conflict. They brought the two sides together at the French chateau of Rambouillet. The Albanians agreed to a peace in February of 1999. Milosevic rejected the deal. NATO was afraid that the repression would increase and more refugees would be forced to leave. NATO threatened to bomb Serbia, and it launched its warplanes and missiles to make good on its promise. NATO bombs hit mostly military targets, but civilians were also killed. And sometimes the civilians were ethnic Albanians fleeing from the Serbs. As the bombs rained down on Serbia, the International War Crimes Tribunal dropped its own bombshell on Milosevic. It accused him and 4 of his lieutenants of war crimes in Kosovo. Louise Arbour of Canada, the chief war crimes prosecutor.
There is credible basis to believe that these accused are criminally responsible for the deportation of 740,000 Kosovo Albanians from Kosovo and for the murder of over 340 identified Kosovo Albanians. The victims were entitled to expect protection from each one of these accused.
As the charges were laid, the West was looking for a way to end the conflict, and it had to deal with Milosevic, now a man accused of war crimes. The bombing campaign was supposed to be a quick operation, lasting only a few days. It actually went on for 78 days before Milosevic ordered his troops and police out of Kosovo. NATO and the Russians sent ground troops in, and then the United Nations took over administration of Kosovo. The years of wars and sanctions had crippled the Serbian economy. Serbs had taken to the streets demanding Milosevic's departure, but he always managed to diffuse the opposition by dividing it. The election in September 2000 was different. The opposition got together behind Vojislav Kostunica. He claimed a clear victory in the election, but the State Election Commission and Milosevic refused to accept those results. That's when the people took to the streets and forced Milosevic to quit. Then Kostunica took the oath of office. He emphasized his commitment to democracy, and he added that he had not expected things to go the way they did.
All a little bit surprised right now, and even I sometimes think that it looks like a dream, but it is a reality, and it is good.
But the man who had gone from being a law professor and the leader of a small party in opposition to becoming president of Yugoslavia also made it clear that he was not giving up claims to Kosovo.
Unity of Serbia and Montenegro we will make firmer than it used to be, that we will put Kosovo under our sovereignty even more than it used to be.
With Kostunica in office, the world lifted sanctions and offered aid to rebuild the country. Kostunica has made it clear that he is a Serb nationalist, and so are his supporters. The CBC's Carol Alf reports on what the new people in power in Belgrade have to say about Serbia's recent past and the future.
The public image of Slobodan Milosevic is now in tatters. The man called the Butcher of the Balkans has retired from politics. Milosevic was a master manipulator of his people. He appealed to their deepest fears, and he had the backing of the country's most powerful elites. This is the Serbian Academy of Arts and Sciences. Its members wrote the original blueprint for Greater Serbia. According to the Academy, Serbs are persecuted and threatened by their neighbors. They are the historic victims of the Balkans. Only by joining together into a single Serb state, according to the Academy, can they be safe. The Academy wrote the manifesto. Milosevic put it into practice, diverting the wealth of his country into waging wars and plunging Serbia into poverty. Now Milosevic is gone, but it's not clear that the ideology of nationalism has vanished as well. Meet Milan Protic, the new mayor of Belgrade. He's just moved into his swanky new office. He helped to bring down Milosevic. He's now a key player in the new regime. I expected to meet the model of modern Europe, and yet the mayor's rhetoric is startlingly similar to that of the Serbian Academy. He says Serbs are the historic victims of the Balkans.
We were the victims more than anyone of ethnic cleansing. In the final score, I'm talking about the final score. Secondly, we went through 10 years of sanctions where life became almost unbearable. If you compare that to the ordeals of other ethnic groups in the Balkans, you can easily see that their destiny and that their hardships were, to some extent, lesser than ours.
A small group of Serbian intellectuals is arguing that the new government in Belgrade has to acknowledge the past 10 years and atone for it. Sonia Bezerko is one of them. She's with the Serbian Helsinki Committee for Human Rights.
They have to acknowledge what they already know publicly. You know, that we are responsible for the crimes as a society, not individually each of these people, but somehow one must also come to the grips with the fact that Milosevic was elected president twice, that there was no real rebel against his policy, but against his defeats. Most of the political, intellectual elite were against his defeats.
One idea being floated by the new regime is that they could invite Nelson Mandela to Belgrade to conduct truth and reconciliation hearing. Another idea is that Slobodan Milosevic should stand trial for crimes committed in Serbia for election fraud and human rights violations. There is no plan to send Milosevic to The Hague, where the entire story of what happened in Yugoslavia over the past 10 years might be revealed. It's enough that he should be blamed for all that happened and that Serbia gets on with the business of nation building.
Garbage, garbage, garbage everywhere, and what to do with it. It's become a bigger problem over the years for many of Canada's larger cities. Some, like Halifax, have begun an aggressive recycling program. Others, like Toronto, so far have concentrated on shipping their garbage problems to landfill sites. The CBC's Raj Alawalia looks at this tale of two cities.
Who cares? It's a fabulous day. Oh, you want to know what it's going to be like for the rest of the weekend? Okay, mostly sunny tomorrow, high of just 8. Scattered showers or flurries for Sunday.
Bit by bit, throughout the day, it builds. The leftovers of daily life. These scenes are repeated by more than 2.5 million people in Toronto every day. That creates tens of thousands of tons of household garbage, which the city has to deal with. Most of it eventually ends up here, the Keel Valley Dump, Canada's largest landfill. 600 trucks a day bring garbage from around Toronto, where it's covered with dirt before the next day's layer arrives. Out of sight, out of mind. Toronto's garbage is anything but out of mind these days. The dump will close in 2 years. The city's politicians have been trying to find an alternative. They wanted to send the garbage to an abandoned mine in northern Ontario, but that plan has fallen apart. The new plan, truck it to Michigan, but that's being met with resistance along the route. That's why people in Toronto say finding a better way to deal with the city's garbage is a priority. Toronto's mayor says he gets the message, and to show it, Mel Lassman recently came here to a facility in Edmonton where waste is turned into low-grade compost used to reclaim mines. It's not as if Toronto does nothing. The city does have a recycling program. Yard waste is collected from city streets and brought here to Keel Valley, where it's piled into these windrows and turned into usable compost. Newspapers, cans, and bottles are also collected to keep them out of the dump. In 1989, provincial and territorial governments agreed to reduce the amount of waste going to landfills by 50% by the year 2000. Toronto is only halfway there, lagging well behind other places. The city has now set itself a new target date, 2006.
You can see here in this one we've got, these plastic bottles, for example. That's new. But the main stuff that's in there, the tin cans, the aluminum cans, that's been there from day one.
Gordon Perks of the Toronto Environmental Alliance has been pushing for more diversion of garbage.
We stopped learning. 10, 15 years ago, we just sort of froze where we were with the blue box and didn't do like a lot of other municipalities are doing and move into the next step, which is composting.
And why would it? After all, Toronto has always had an easy way of getting rid of its garbage. It owned the Keel Valley dump, and that meant the city could get rid of its waste for under $10 a ton. That's a lot cheaper than investing in technology to keep more waste from going into the ground. Andrew Pollock is in charge of diverting waste for Toronto.
The public's also been very strong about not wanting their taxes increased, and that's the balance that has to be struck. The cost of these diversion technologies are significantly higher. What changes now, of course, is when we're contracting out for waste disposal after Keel Valley closes. And now, every ton we ship off to Michigan, looks like we're going to be going to Michigan, that's going to cost $52 a ton. So now there's a much stronger financial incentive. You can certainly make the economic case better to invest in these new technologies.
Nova Scotia is the first province to use these technologies to reach the 50% diversion goal, with Halifax leading the way, diverting more than 60% of its garbage from a decade ago.
The public wanted government to do something. They recognized that recycling and composting and reducing our waste is helpful to us, and we should continue to do that. People did not want to do the wrong thing.
The state of Nova Scotia's landfills helped his cause. Halifax 4 years ago was where Toronto is now, running out of space in its landfill. On top of that, the Sackville site was a smelly place filled with things that could have been recycled, especially organic materials which create a greenhouse gas, methane, and contaminating leachate. To change that, in 1996, the Nova Scotia government simply started banning certain substances from going to landfills, such as this new one for Halifax. The list includes things like tires and plastic containers, as well as organic materials. In Halifax, a community task force went one better. It developed a comprehensive recycling program, one that diverted the wet, smelly kitchen waste away from any new landfill, despite the extra cost, a major step that Toronto has not been willing to take. For the past 2 years, the Halifax Regional Municipality has picked up these green bins. They're filled with everything from yard waste to wet paper towels to vegetable peelings to chicken bones. Both kitchen waste from homes and businesses and yard waste are brought to facilities like this one in Dartmouth, which is a far cry from the simple methods of backyard composting. The waste is sorted and shredded. Then it's moved into this vat, where it sits for 3 weeks to heat up and decompose. Computers continually monitor the moisture, oxygen, and heat levels for optimum results. A computer-controlled paddle aerates the material to speed up the process. It pushes the material from one end of the vat to the other before spitting out the nearly finished product. Then it's left in piles for 2 months before finally becoming compost considered good enough to be used in any type of garden. It's all possible because of people like Cass McLean, who separate their daily household garbage. The process not only takes more time, but extra containers in her kitchen.
This is the indoor green gut, and you get this pretty well with a family of 4. I can fill this in a day. It goes right to the top, and I have, when I go to clean out my fridge, I often have to make 2 trips to the garbage to the large green gut with that.
And she has to put up with more than just the extra work.
The biggest problem with that is the smell. If in the summertime, in the heat, there's a bad smell and there's huge problem with fruit flies that nobody seems to be able to solve. You can open this, say at 4 o'clock on a sunny day, on a warm day in the summer, and you don't breathe in. You'd breathe fruit flies. So it's real quick, okay? This is a magazine. It goes in the bond box.
Of course, magazines and newspaper recyclables have to be kept separate from the food, making dealing with the trash more complicated.
And then, like a latex glove or an old freezer bag that is no longer useful, nice and leaky, that goes in the regular garbage. It just goes right in there. I used to fight a lot of it. I used to do a lot of complaining because I would be standing around with something in my hand and I really didn't know what to do with it. And I realized, my gosh, if I'm going to do something with this, I'm going to have to create another bin for this.
It's more than just recycling. In Nova Scotia, they try to keep products like bottles and tires out of the mix. This is done with the help of business, making it cheaper for taxpayers.
Essentially a cradle-to-grave approach that manufacturers of a product should be partly responsible for the product, not just when it leaves the store shelves, but when it becomes they should be responsible partly for the management of it once it becomes waste.
Take, for example, paint. Here at a paint recycling plant, workers sort old cans by type and color, then strain the paint over and over to make sure it's smooth. The end result is 175,000 gallons of old paint a year turned into 40,000 gallons of new paint, ready to be sold instead of dumped in a landfill or burned. The paint here comes from homes. The provincial government is looking at making paint sellers responsible for getting unused paint to a business like this. Simply banning paint and a lot of other things from going into the garbage is one thing, but it's impossible to make sure everyone is complying. That's what makes it such a complex process. Once the trucks dump their loads and the large objects are pulled out, the rest goes through a machine which rips the garbage bags open. Sorters then pull out what recyclables they can, leaving the rest to be shredded, further processed to remove any remaining organic materials, and then, and only then, dumped at the landfill. Fred Wendt is supervisor of solid waste for the municipality.
We end up with basically inert material. Plastic for which there's no recycling market, the old rubber boots, textiles, some of them old furniture. We don't have the nuisances that we had in the previous landfill, the seagulls and the odor and that sort of thing. We don't have those problems, and the result of all of that work and effort is that we were able to site a landfill fairly near the core of the region.
So it works in Halifax, but could it work in Toronto? A city with 6 times more people and a makeup unlike any other in Canada, says Andrew Pollock.
50% of our population lives in apartment buildings, and that's a particular challenge. We only divert about 10% of waste from apartment buildings right now, and we need to find ways to drive that up.
Well, first we need to say there are parts of the city of Toronto that are just like Halifax, the residential communities where you could have a program just like the one in Halifax up and running inside of 2 or 3 years. We don't need to wait to do that. We know that lesson. Let's get that going.
How do you deal with the challenges of the apartment buildings and the nature of the apartment buildings in Toronto?
Well, apartment buildings are tougher. What we found in some municipalities in the United States is that they dedicate staff to working with each building manager, saying, well, if you have a chute system, there's a very simple technology you can use. So you push a button and it moves the chute at the bottom so the recyclables go into the bin, or push it again and the wet waste goes into the bin. So that's one way of doing it. None of this is impossible. It just takes a will and a little bit of time.
There's some things all sides of the Toronto garbage debate agree on.
Disposal costs are going up, diversion technologies are going down. So those lines are going to cross, and I believe in the future, and you'll find that diversion technologies will be clearly cheaper than disposal.
It takes time. It takes time to build the facilities, to buy the trucks, because you might need different trucks, to educate the public on what you need to do. We have to start right away. You know, it's like we've been given 5 years grace period. If at the end of the 5 years we're no further along, then shame on us.
It's impossible these days to get away from commercials. They are everywhere, on radio, television, the internet. It's a barrage that just keeps going. This is a story of what happened when a group of high school students wanted to keep commercial messages out of their high school. Matt Cowan of the CBC's Undercurrents follows the story of the protests and the lessons in hard-boiled politics that were learned.
They are kids who live on orderly streets in spacious places. Typical teenagers.
Yeah, I have a plan to do it all when school's over.
They just happen to grow up in the age of information. Maybe they have developed some kind of filter for all the commercials they confront.
Call for least details.
You see, they get them enough. There's just one place where they don't want to see commercial messages at all. For 15 minutes late last school year, a handful of students at this Mississauga school staged a walkout.
Okay, we got 5 more minutes to yell and walk and stuff.
Sure, it's high school, but this was like protesting 101.
Education.
The students had everything covered. There were even cupcakes.
We will not be sold!
And of course, a bit of rhetoric.
Walk out! This is a message to the administration and the school board that we're not going to be silenced and we're not going to be shut down. We're going to have our voice said and heard, and this is just the beginning. YNN is an in-school TV news program targeted to teens.
Israel is promising to pull out of Lebanon by July as part of peace talks with Syria.
Early this year, Meadowvale Secondary opened the door to a pilot program. The deal? In exchange for showing a 12.5-minute daily newscast.
Up next, snowball suspension.
The school got a whole heap of fancy new equipment. The catch? Each 12.5-minute program would include 2 minutes of commercials.
We oppose the whole idea and the concept of a big corporation coming to our school and making money off the minds of the students, and the whole idea of having a biased news enforced on us.
When students tried to spread the anti-YNN message in school, they say they were shut down and tuned out. First, there was Lindsay Porter's paper.
We put out the paper as a way to voice our opinion.
Very shortly after the paper was distributed, Lindsay came home and told us that they were going to suspend her from school.
Lori Pedwell is the principal of Meadowvale Secondary.
The newspaper that was put out by a student last year was called Eat Me Completely. That would be my first objection.
She had it on her desk and she just picked it up and tossed it down. It was just something of absolute disgust to her. And even the title to her was offensive. You know, she felt it was an oral sex reference. You know, but in fact it was actually from Gord Downey from the Tragically Hips, one of his ramblings during a concert.
Principal Pedwell says it wasn't just the anti-YNN article. That Eat Me was completely inappropriate.
None of the articles was signed. There was no way of knowing who wrote the articles in there. The title was inappropriate. There was profanity in it. And most significantly, there was an article in there that criticized Black History Month.
Students considered it censorship, but with Porter off to university, the resistance was in need of a new hero.
All right, Dave Brand, he's in bikes. He's the leader of bikes. Yeah, he's the leader of bikes.
That's Brand. And this is his band Bikes, performing in The Bassist's Basement.
He said, hey, my name is like that's why I don't know why.
It was during a show at the school that Brand struck a chord with students and staff, not for his lyrics.
Like a damn iceberg, the shit right out of my ass.
It's what some calmly refer to as the Meadowstock incident.
Meadowstock is the Battle of the Bands.
And first prize is usually some recording studio time or something like that.
Before it started, I went to one of my friends and I got a marker and I wrote YNN stinks on my white shirt.
Like his shirt said that, but it was approved.
And we played one song and I had my shirt on and then I asked the audience,
what do you guys think of YNN? And we all booed, and then they got their cord pulled.
Then afterwards I found out that it was one of the other staff sponsor who cut off our power because she thought that talking about YNN was inappropriate.
The staff sponsors told me they felt the situation was unsafe because of the crowd being invited to get sort of into this frenzy.
Brand created a little racket with his own account of the Meadowstock incident. Adbusters magazine picked it up, and now Toronto's alternative weekly gave the suburban subversives prominent play.
The way these guys expressed their message, like they sort of had the basics, they sort of had like a gut reaction to what was going on, but they didn't have like all the blah 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 that I normally hear from a lot of the more seasoned activists. And for another thing, it wasn't sort of coming from somewhere else. It wasn't coming from, you know, the local socialist group, you know, pulling them aside and going, guys, you know, they're like, oh yeah, you're right, dude, you're right. No, it just came from a sense that that's not the right thing.
Now legitimized as a worthy protest movement by the anti-corporate press, the students were on a mission. Next stop, the Peel School Board. But first, they had to drop by the mall library to compile a list of grievances.
Okay, opt-out.
Basically, the terrible conditions, like how we're like...
Terrible conditions.
We had to say something about the carols. Yeah, basically we're like forced to sit there and...
You see, the students weren't actually forced to watch YNN. If they opted out, they sat at a carol in the school library. But they say that was punishment in itself.
They were so confining. It's difficult to explain unless you've been in one and without your choice. You know, it was almost like being in a prison. You know, the walls.
They're essentially like a prison. It's like blocking you off from everything else there because you can't see anything in front of you, you can't see anything to the sides of you unless you sort of move your head around. And they have people walking around telling you to stick your head back in the carol.
If it's considered punishment to go to the library and sit quietly and do your work, I think that's a strange concept of punishment. If I had announced to the school, if you'd like to opt out of YNN, just get up and leave your class any day that you feel like it at 9:45, wander out of the class, go to the caf, have a slushie, go out for a smoke, go where you want, do whatever you want, talk whomever you want. I guess about 90% of the student body would have opted out.
Principal Pedwell points out that there are current magazines and clipping files available for the school's conscientious objectors. Mark Booter, well, he's already on to Chomsky, though he does still have a weakness for Brittany. On the day of the big date with the school board, the students put the final touches on their speeches. It was tense for a time.
Go faster.
I'm just making sure everyone's catching up with me.
Being late wouldn't look good to the people in suits who made decisions on important things.
We're supposed to be there in 6 minutes. So the meeting starts in 6 minutes.
Turns out it was awards night for academic and athletic excellence. Student unrest would have to wait. Here, there were strict rules on what students could and couldn't say.
See, a librarian really narrows it down.
And if you want to talk about specifics like that, you must do it in committee. It's not that we're trying to stop you from talking.
I'm going to talk about opting out.
Eventually, the students got to have a nice little chat with the board. Trustees got a first-hand account of opting out and the whole eat me completely story.
However, I like to speculate that the hard line was taken by the administration.
It went according to plan. That is, until a trustee decided to show Mark what it's like to play in the big leagues.
Mark, in your presentation, you referred to the fact that you were brainwashed. Could you give me an example of when and how you were brainwashed?
In my presentation, I believe I said this was a joke that was circulating through the student body, how everyone knows that the TV is a system of thought control, and it was a joke.
Okay, but in your presentation you said that you were right. I'd like you to think on that because I'd like to know when and how you were brainwashed.
That's a very good question, and I appreciate you for asking that. But the very first program we watched, commercials, they are a form of thought control and thought manipulation. And when you see a commercial, the idea behind the commercial is to get you to go out and buy the product.
Okay, truth be told, the students have had a little ongoing problem with the language of protest.
Right now, we are the Students Against YNN organization, Say No. Before, we were Students Against YNN Coalition, because Coalition kind of says, it's very youth angsty, but it never really caught on because people wanted, say no. It's very cute and clever.
So there's less angst now?
There's angst, all right. Like we're youth. That's the grade 10s and grade 9s we have in our group. They're not really concerned about the political side of it more so than like damning the man.
And Rod McDonald, he's the man, the CEO of YNN.
History shows us that social and industrial change, what some of us refer to as progress, is never accomplished through consensus.
At this meeting, there were no embarrassing exchanges. McDonald delivered a sophisticated message with a supporting cast, a student.
If we continue with this in the fall, I think there can be very positive aspects of it.
And a parent, too.
Good evening, members of the boards, trustees. My name is Claude Dessel. As a parent, as a taxpayer, I feel that it's been a worthwhile project.
Strange thing is, he didn't mention he's also the PR point man for the makers of YNN. This meeting was filled with facts and figures as the results of a research report were revealed.
YNN news broadcasts had limited application to the educational curriculum. It did not relate to what was taught in school.
The news wasn't all bad for YNN. Parents were found to be heavily in favor of the program. As for the target market,
approximately half of the students said no, that YNN should not continue at Meadowvale.
So it's down to this. Decision night. McDonald had already dropped the controversial commercials in favor of paid public service announcements, but in truth, YNN looked like it might be in trouble. Until the board's director dropped a bombshell. McDonald had been busy since his last appearance before the board.
They are proposing, in fact, have made a number of modifications to the program. So it's not
unbeknownst to the students, McDonald sent the board letters proposing that teachers be given the choice whether or not to show YNN in their classrooms. He also sweetened the deal.
It's also our understanding that YNN or Athena proposes to replace the hardware every 3 to 4 years, so it's kept update. And also the agreement has been amended so that it could be canceled with 30 days notice after the first 180 days.
The school board bit.
I am proposing a motion.
A motion to continue the partnership with YNN.
All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hands. Motion carries.
The students were seriously bummed.
It's still not cool because, at first it was the commercialism was bad, but the commercialism is still there. Commercials are still there, and the corporation is still there. It's all about the corporation taking over the public school system, and that's not good. I'm so upset.
I'm going to keep trying to protest against this because I still think it's wrong. Even if they're going to keep YNN, we still have our rights. I think that they're just pushing it on us.
I think the students made their presence known, and I think they had every right to do that.
I don't think, or can I put it this way, I think that they made as much an impact on us as the other stakeholders did. That would be parents and staff and the public who took part in this pilot project.
At least they learned something about the way of the world from this whole YNN episode.
I would like to say that we had a lot of impact, but looking back, I don't think we were ever really taken too seriously.
And that's all for News in Review. I'm Knowlton Nash. See you next time.